All right, everybody, welcome to the March Experience Talks Zoomcast. Very excited about this one. It's Creating Cultural Community, a panel discussion on how arts and culture can create and unite community. And very excited about our three panelists, three incredible arts leaders from Los Angeles. I'm going to introduce each of them briefly. This is very brief. You should go to our website and check out how much more amazing these three people are. To start out with, we have Collette Williams. Alleyne is the Chief Education Officer for Inner City Arts. She has over a decade of experience in alternative and arts education. As an artist and artist educator, Collette has performed and co-directed various companies throughout Los Angeles and in her hometown of New Orleans. We got a New Orleans girl in the house today. Leslie Ito is the Executive Director of the Armory Center for the Arts and is a highly regarded entrepreneurial arts executive in Los Angeles. She served as the President and COO of the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center, one of the largest ethnic arts and cultural centers in the US. And then Betty Avila is the Executive Director of Self-Help Graphics and Arts. Betty Avila's work has centered on the intersection of the arts and social justice, with particular focus on community building, public space, and youth empowerment. And she's also the chair of the Latinx Arts Alliance. Welcome, Collette, Leslie, and Betty. I'm very, very happy to see you here and excited about our conversation.
Thank you, likewise.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So I want to start out by letting each of you talk a little bit about your origin story. I love to hear about why people became who they are and where they came from and what inspired them to do that. So becoming artists and arts administrators, how did each of you get bitten by the arts? And why art? Why art for each of you? So Collette, you want to give it a roll? Start out. Tell us a story of the Bayou.
Well, it's funny you say that because growing up, I would go dance in different states for dance competitions. And when people would find out we were from New Orleans, they would say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you danced in New Orleans. I thought you only sat by the bayou and ate crawfish." And I was just like, this is unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, originally from New Orleans, my story, I have danced since I could walk. And I have always had a love for the arts. I never thought my life would go in any other direction other than the arts. I grew up in the conservatory world, did the dance circuit, had an amazing studio with lifelong friends that I'm still connected with. And many of us are still dancing and active in the arts, doing advocacy. And found my way to LA when I decided I wanted to take on the entertainment industry and really come out to LA and see what was happening, what the hype was about California. I did it at the same time that the entertainment industry and film industry was booming in New Orleans. So it was a little crazy, but I took the risk and came out here and fell in love. And my passion, my focus for arts education is really rooted in access. It's rooted in social justice. And it took me a while to really recognize the social justice connection because that wasn't a conversation I had growing up. It was really just about the arts. And I watched my parents do what they could do to make sure that I had exposure. And then I recognized when I got out here that there were so many students that one, didn't have access to the arts, and what they had access to did not meet their needs, that the families didn't necessarily know how to support them. And that stems from, that's arts and education. I came from a non-traditional space with education. So it has been for the past 16 years about making sure that there is equity in the arts and education space and making sure that students see themselves in the work that we do, they see the possibilities, and that they also are not restricted by what they come from, but that they see the possibilities of where they can go, and that we as arts administrators, arts leaders, or educators are finding the resources and then guiding them through the process of discovering who they are. Because in so many cases, it's not that students are not capable, it's that they just have not been encouraged, and they have not been walked through the process of utilizing all of the resources that people throw at underserved populations. If you have never experienced that, you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So my work is really focused on making sure that students, if they're interested, that they have access to it. If they don't know they're interested, that they have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they know how to tap into those resources. And then they're just given the support, whether it's from the organizations that they're working with or from their families, to really pursue a life that will make them feel whole because they're doing something that's meaningful. Yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Leslie, what about you?
Well, my mom knew that I was terrible with anything that had to do with ball. And so I was not going to go down, she was not going to keep me busy by putting me in sports activities. So she put me in a whole variety of arts activities when I was little. And one of them was taking classes at the Pasadena Art Workshop, which is the precursor to the Armory. So I grew up in this environment. And I had a really influential teacher in first, second, and third grade, Mrs. Rao, who was doing arts integration before it was called arts integration. We were learning math and science through the arts. And it turns out I learned maybe about 10 years ago that Mrs. Rao was trained, she was a student of Sister Corita's. So I feel like I'm like a direct descendant of, artistic descendant of Sister Corita. When my sister and I were, maybe I was like in middle school, my grandparents took us to a video screening at the Aratani Theater. And it was a program on telling the story of the internment camps. And it was the first time that they had actively tried to share our history, our family history with us. And I realized at that moment that, and looking back on it, I realized that the power of the arts to tell stories that, are hard to tell. And I think that was really a turning point for me. And then the final turning point was having been a part of the first cohort of Getty interns. The summer of 1993, I had an internship at Visual Communications and learned that, you could work in the arts and not be an artist, that there was this whole business side of the arts. Because even though my mom had, exposed me to all different kinds of arts, I didn't really exceed at any of those disciplines, but I came out an arts supporter and an advocate. And through the Getty program, kind of found my path. And so for me, the connection to the arts has always been, this tool towards community empowerment, social justice, and using the arts as a tool towards change.
Fantastic. Betty, talk to us. Tell us your
Sure.
tale.
So I, listening to Leslie, I'm like, I wanted to, play sports and be on our, the local park co-ed teams. And my parents were always like, that's for boys. Baseball was for boys.
Wow.
And so I ended up in a ballet folklorico class for 10 years. I danced with this particular teaching artist who I credit so much with instilling a type of discipline that my brothers didn't get playing baseball. But I also commuted on a school bus to go to school from the time I was in third grade to senior year in high school. And I didn't fully appreciate the visual aesthetic of the neighborhood until I left it and went to college. And then all of a sudden I really missed, these murals by these legacy Chicano artists whose names I didn't know. It just, there was something there for me, I think, around this connection of this thing that I had that I took for granted, and then that was missing in my life. And while I was in college, my little brother, who was 15, 16 at the time, got into graffiti art. And my parents were having a meltdown. They were like, oh my God, he's becoming a criminal. They would take away all of his his art supplies. And I came in, really with this mission to help him understand himself within an art historical context, not being an art historian myself, and pair that with also getting to intern at the Getty Research Institute and their internship program. And it connected a lot of dots for me about who is art for, who makes art, what is it about, where does art live? Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be in a big white box. And that was it. That summer really, really did it for me. And I think because of where I grew up and because of the visual landscape that I had, that sort of connection with social justice was always very clear for me. And I've been at it ever since.
Fantastic. You've each mentioned some of the ideas around culture and tradition. So can you talk about how important that is for one, and then also how does the arts play into the idea of promoting culture, tradition, family, mythology, all of that type of stuff to create what you guys are trying to do in community? How does it play into how your work is done where you are? How important is your own cultural tradition to what you do? Maybe Leslie, you want to start us off?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think prior to my almost 6 years at the JCCC, I probably would have answered the question differently, but my time being fourth generation Japanese American, I think my definition of arts and community and culture are definitely from a hybrid perspective. But the opportunity to spend time in Japan really helped me to reconnect, to understand tradition better, and to connect with non-Western forms of art and tradition has been really formative for me. And I think at the same time, I'm all about creating new traditions. So creating new traditions in cultural institutions is something that I love doing. We created a Fiesta Matsuri, which is a hybrid of Japanese Children's Day and Dia de los Niños. And I think that Los Angeles is a really great place for us to pick and choose the best things about our cultures together and create new traditions. So I'm all about traditions, and both the 17 generations of tradition that I discovered in Japan, but also, the new traditions. Like in my family, we started one about 7 years ago where we bake cupcakes for Martin Luther King's birthday while we listen to his speeches, and we make little decorations with his face and his sayings on our cupcakes. And we do it every year. We started 7 years ago. So, I think that there is a power to traditions, both the long-standing ones as well as, thinking about the new ones that we want to create together.
It's beautiful. Betty, how about you?
Yeah. So I'm the daughter of immigrants from Central Mexico, and I think growing up I had this this understanding of like, okay, that's where our family comes from, and that's where our traditions are rooted. And as I grew up and I got to learn more about the city and the community here, and really having this affiliation with the East Side community, I got to know the Chicano identity. And I think for a long time I felt that was separate. And I was like, no, I know where my family's from. And like the border didn't cross us, we're from a different place. And I think over time I came to the realization that this identity is actually, it's relatively new, politically speaking, as a political identity, and culturally it's, generations long, but it suddenly didn't feel like something that I was outside of. It was like, oh, actually, no, I can come into this, and this is a culture that is meant to be inclusive and bring people in. And so I think for me, something like Day of the Dead, for example, is a tradition of Los Angeles. It's not something that my family experienced in Mexico, and my parents knew about it, and they knew about other regions where it was celebrated and where it's very important. And for them, their understanding of Day of the Dead is completely informed by Chicano LA. And I kind of love that, because now it's a tradition of my family that comes from us being here. And so I think that sort of fusion is a big part of what we call tradition, and the sort of hybrid nature of culture, and how it's sort of ever fluid and evolving. But I think it's sort of full circle for me to have learned about Day of the Dead through a place like Self-Help Graphics, and to now be able to steward that tradition in this position is really exciting.
Love that. I love that. Collette, how about you?
This question is always very interesting to me, because growing up in New Orleans, I was surrounded by, the culture of that city is unbelievable, but also growing up, it is not something that is presented as a big deal. This is just the life that we lived. And I think personally, I didn't miss that until I moved, because there were so many festivals and cultural activities that we did where, it was everyday life for us. And I think I grew to value that even more when I moved to LA. I didn't know about Day of the Dead. That wasn't something that we acknowledged in the South. So, now being with inner city arts and being surrounded by artists who have grown up here, and the students that are immersed in it culturally, it's really opened my eyes, because we did an altar this past season, and to see the students' response even in the virtual space, for them to be able to bring their relatives into the space and celebrate them and honor them. To me, it increases the relevance of the work that we do as artists. It increases the students' buy-in and their ability their desire to participate, because they see the things that they have done in their homes with their families and their grandparents for years now present on canvas or celebrated on stage. And where they may have thought this was something that only existed in their community, the neighborhood that they lived in, it's celebrated in museums, it's celebrated in schools. So it increases the buy-in for our students. It makes them feel connected, and it also allows them to see the connection to their peers in the work that they do. I just feel like the arts in general is that gap. It's the bridge. It's the bridge that closes the gap between cultures. And this year during COVID and all of the unrest that we have experienced, I think culture is so important now, because now we get to uplift everyone, no matter where you're from. We are honoring those origins and seeing ourselves as individuals. And I think it's only going to get better from here. We had to experience some challenging situations to really be able to see ourselves as the unique beings that we are through our cultures, through our homes, and through the arts. So it's important that we keep it going.
Yeah, I want to play off that because Leslie and I got on first of the two of us into Zoomville here, and we were talking. This has been just such a difficult few years, and it just feels like we've all been carrying around this huge rock, and between political unrest and then the pandemic hits, and this year just seems like a collective sigh of relief. You've all talked about social justice. Where now does social justice meet the arts, and where do we go with that? I feel like there's this wound that's right down the middle of the country that we have to somehow heal. Is there a place where social justice and the arts come together to be able to make that happen? Because Collette, what you said, I want to believe that, but I also, there's this other sense that I'm kind of feeling like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop too. So how do we really mend that gap? I want to just hear what you guys think about that. Betty, maybe you can start off.
Sure. I think the challenge about that question is we're still in it. Like we're still processing, we're still experiencing it. And I think that I have no doubt that the arts are going to be a critical element to that processing of a very serious communal trauma that is worldwide. So I think in some ways it's less about identifying the how in the immediate, and I think just tapping into, how can arts and artists be part of people digesting what's happening, like what they're experiencing. For a lot of people, like very serious, devastating loss. And, for others, it might not be, a person, but a job, or, like the decision to not go to your freshman year of college. I feel like art is going to be a very critical tool for communities on a very broad level, like not just within the structures of arts organizations or museums, but the arts sector in general. I think even beyond that, it's going to take a long time before we can sort of like look back with like 2020 vision and see, this is what happened and this is where we were at that time. I do think it's going to be process oriented, and I hope that the arts are at the center of it.
Yeah. Leslie, how about you?
I agree with what Betty just said. And just to take it a step further, I think that within the context of the racial reckoning that's happening, also, I think the arts play a huge role in that, both in terms of the space to have challenging conversations, and also the healing piece of it as well. So I think I'm feeling frustrated. Meet like the one should be in person right now. So
Yeah, Collette.
I can agree with both. I feel like we can't put enough emphasis on the value of the arts in this change that needs to occur, because since the beginning of time, the arts has been that silent component that doesn't come with emotion. Well, it's not verbal emotion. It's not you can create an art piece that expresses what you are going through, and it's up to the viewer to interpret what that means. It is movement that expresses joy, pain. It's media, animation that expresses, you know, excitement, what is happening. And I think what we have experienced over the past year, although there was a huge impact on the arts community when it comes to loss of jobs and the ability to perform, we have seen artists completely transform their businesses, their mechanism of delivery, and they have challenged themselves in ways that, yes, it's uncomfortable, it's frustrating, but when you talk to artists now, they're saying, you know, I learned something new about myself. The resilience that has come from this, the different streams of income that have come from this. So I think there's a way for us to look at this time with all of the pain and sorrow and the racial tensions, the civic, everything that has surfaced and become very clear and apparent during this time. I think the arts has the ability to support, as Leslie said, the healing that comes with social change. It has definitely increased our awareness as a society. The arts have played a big part in that. In the movement, everything that has happened over the past year was based on high levels of frustration, pain, anger, and people coming up with creative ways to present their message so they are heard. So I think that this is an opportunity for us to take this experience and use the arts as a mechanism of transformation. Is it going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. But I think if we stay committed to the work that we're doing with the organizations that we work with, and really continue to amplify the voices and the disparities and present the solutions to those challenges through the arts, we have the ability to make some serious change. It will take time. Betty said it, time will tell, but we have to stay at it, and we have to recognize the power of the arts. And I know this may not be the space, but I think really recognizing the power of the arts for the students that we serve and making sure that they have access to it in their school day. It's not a separate piece, especially coming back or living in COVID until we know what life is going to look like after this or post. Students need that opportunity to express, whether that's through the arts or just extracurricular activities. We have to acknowledge that need to utilize self-expression to work through the trauma that everyone has lived in.
Yeah, it was a great loss. You know, I mean, I work with older adults with the arts, and you know, there's been a strong feeling of isolation and loneliness in that sector. But I think what happened with the kids is another level. You know, it's just such a severe rending and loss of normal life. And you know, the idea, what Betty mentioned, the idea that somebody actually might miss their freshman year of college or not graduate or go to a prom. And you know, I don't think that there's any way to measure what that does to, you know, an entire generation of kids. I want to talk a little bit about isolation in general. You know, I'm not sure people were feeling super connected before the pandemic with what had been going on for a few years. And isolation obviously can be physical and emotional, and it can be, you know, through class and income and, you know, every level of it. What is the role of the arts in creating the opposite feeling in people? People have felt isolation and loneliness a lot in recent times. So how do we utilize the arts to create a sense of belonging and community and purpose in people? And how are you guys working towards that? You know, we're headed towards a reopening of some kind, and you know, some hybrid new normal for a little while. How are your arts organizations going to deal with that? Betty, how about you?
Yeah, I think we realized very quickly how having a physical space that is a community space, a gathering space, how easy that makes it for different people to connect and to work together and collaborate. And I think that's just sort of part of the identity of self-help graphics. And so when we lost the space and, we weren't coming in at all, and artists, they lost all of their part-time jobs all at once. And we really understood the value of sharing space, I think, in a different way. And particularly for the young artists who, like, they don't have their own studios, they don't have a lot of their own equipment. They're accessing it in places like this. And for the elder artists who, like, aren't super tech savvy, and what they know is you go to that place and that's where you see people and that's where you make art. And so we saw that sort of extreme right away. But I credit the community for figuring out a way to stay connected. And I look at, just last week we hosted a 3-day printmaking summit, and all of a sudden our community is not just LA, it's like LA and New York and Oregon and Texas and like Germany and Canada. And that was a very interesting learning from this past year, is understanding that physical space is one thing, and then the sort of virtual space can provide other types of connections. And I'm very grateful to this broader community who is willing to engage in that way, and to be very forgiving as these places who do operate and have a physical home figure out how to create space in a virtual territory.
Yeah. Collette, what about you?
So
Wow, you self-caught yourself on the mute thing. I think that might be the first thing where you're like the first person I've ever, and that's a superpower. You unmuted yourself without being told to.
well, the funny part is I said, "Oh, you're muted." I said it to myself. So I guess
it's like the most popular phrase of the last year. You're on mute. You're on mute.
It is. I looked that up the other day. It's on the list of top 10. I mean, for inner city arts, our campus, it's an oasis. Like, it is an oasis in the middle of downtown, and all of our work has been centered around getting people to the campus, because that space is safety. It is energy. It is inspiration. So for us to think about what it meant to go virtual, and to think in the beginning, oh, this is going to be a couple of weeks, we'll be fine. And then the reality sets in. And I think for a moment, everyone was okay, because it just seemed like, oh, this is temporary. And over time, we really began to realize the benefits of not just having our students in the community that we serve on our campus, but our staff being able to gather and brainstorm and come together and talk about planning for students' lessons, what events look like on our campus. So when it comes to the feeling of isolation and how we have looked at it and addressed it, I think we just make sure we create the space for people to talk about it when they're feeling it, whether it's the students or the staff. It's acknowledging the heaviness of what isolation is. And like you said, Tim, you don't know how connected people were even before COVID in this world of this space of technology. I think we now know, when we look at how we've prioritized our life over the past year, I personally hope that we step away from technology a little bit and begin to really connect with humans again, to connect with people and build relationships. What we have done, though, to address it is to really look at how we can create those safe spaces for our students in Zoom. We are now, we're doing a lunch table, a Zoom lunch table where everybody comes together to just talk. It's not an official meeting, but we just talk about life. The other day we had a conversation about the type of dreams, strange things that happen in dreams. And it's also creating those moments for students. I've watched my own children say they have friends that they've met in their virtual classrooms because they have not been in person, but teachers are creating social hours. Students are creating social time. So I think that's part of one of the things we've learned at this time. Yes, human connection, physical campus, all very important. And there's also other ways to connect. I think the biggest challenge is how do you make it authentic in this space? The authentic connection that exists when you're in a physical proximity to a person, even to a student. There are things that you can do in a physical space to help a student work through a challenge when creating that you can't do on Zoom. So it's that creative thinking of how do you create those safe spaces for students to still feel connected, and also for them to just acknowledge when they're not feeling connected and they feel isolated and they need a way to express that.
Yeah. Leslie, how about you in the Armory?
Yeah, I feel like we're trying extra hard to overcome isolation. So for instance, our staff members are, we meet twice a week, where I can't even remember, but I think we used to meet every other week. But now we're meeting twice a week. That's like, my math is bad, but I think that's 4 times more than we used to. So I'm curious to see what of that practices that we've been doing is going to actually stick. Even in my own family, we're eating twice as many meals together around the table. I mean, that's incredible. Like that's definitely one of my top 5 silver linings in all of this. And the other thing that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of the isolation piece is the digital divide. We talked a lot about it like 15 years ago. And I feel like we're not talking about it enough in this day and age, and all the people that are being left behind because they don't have access. I mean, look at me. I've been frozen a few times here, even in my own space. So, I think it's that troubles me. And I was just talking with my colleague Lilia today about, who's working on that issue and where can we sign on to make sure that we fight for everybody to have access to technology and digital connection, because I think that's a big part of the isolation. We at the Armory, at the beginning of the pandemic, we started by phone, actually giving phone art instruction both to older adults that we had been working with for a long time, and then also in the probation camps. And it has evolved since then, but that we realized that's where we had to start with those particular populations. The other thing that I've been really excited about is care packages. So personally, and also on behalf of the Armory, we've been delivering care packages, art supplies, masks and hand sanitizers, and anything that's going to bring a little bit of extra joy into people's lives. I think that human touch is really important, and letter writing, like handwritten letters. I'm so happy to be returning to that aspect of life to battle isolation.
Fantastic. Very cool. So the digital divide, I have an idea that, the tech companies made $70 gazillion during this thing. Maybe they could do something about it. I don't know. It's a crazy idea. How much money did Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook and, you know, yada, yada, yada. It's like, how many devices have they given away to bridge the digital divide? But I digress. Let me come back to what we're talking about. Can each of you talk about Los Angeles as what, you know, you've mentioned it a little bit, but, you know, Los Angeles is this remarkably diverse place, you know, and sometimes it really works and sometimes it struggles to work. And is there a way that the arts and cultural institutions and community can create a way for our diversity to be more an advantage than what it is now? Because it's, you know, it just seems like something that it is and can be celebrated, but it just seems to me that we could do better with making people realize what a remarkable thing that is, to be amongst each other, and the opportunity that might give us if the arts could be the glue between that. Betty, you want to start out? I'm kind of trying to remember which Brady Bunch box I picked last, but I'm not sure I'm doing a very good job of that.
No worries. happy to chime in. You know, I actually was just speaking with somebody who is in Minnesota and you know, considering a significant life move to LA, and their description of LA was, I immediately understood, oh, you've never been here, you've watched this on TV, you've watched this in movies. And so like you have this very tiny little sliver of what the city is. And even that little sliver is highly stereotypical. It's not genuine. And I think that, you know, that's somebody who doesn't live here. But I think also about like the way that people who are here process the city. And it is a very segregated city, you know, like you're in your corner, or you're part of the world. And you know, I'm totally guilty of like, oh, if it's like past LACMA, I'm not going. And so I think that there's this need, I think, to create an identity around the city that is really rooted in that cultural diversity, and that totally rejects anything that, you know, Hollywood puts out there. And I think also sort of like uncoupling ourselves from the industry, and being able to, and I mean, and this has happened a lot, right? Like different neighborhoods have done cultural asset mapping and have really zeroed in on like what makes this place what it is and what makes it shine, and who are the people that are the gems of this neighborhood. And I think that's something that can really be done on a broader level, citywide, and really zeroed in on, you know, who are the culture makers and the culture keepers of the many different identities of this city. And, you know, I think collectively we could start rattling off names right now. And so that knowledge is there. I think it's more about like how can we elevate those narratives?
Great. Collette, how about you?
I agree. I mean, I think, what is it, almost 200 languages that are spoken in Los Angeles, and some that are very prominent in the schools that we serve. I've worked with schools that have had to have documents translated in 5 to 10 different languages because of the population. So yes, I do think the city is very isolated. I think also as a result of what we have experienced this year, we have the opportunity to really focus on humanity, and the rich diversity that exists in this place. And it's, I think if we could really start to see each other for the individuals that we are and highlight that, look at it for its value and not as a difference and I need to stay away, but as a difference and I need to embrace. I think it also has to do with us as individuals getting outside of our comfort zone and embracing different cultures, and what kind of events can the city create? Can the different communities create, where we're honoring the cultures and bringing people together for that diversity? I mean, it's work, and you have to have the infrastructure that supports that. There also has to be a desire. There has to be a desire for us to get out of our comfort zones and travel. I mean, I think I've lived in multiple valleys now, never lived in the city of LA, but work in LA. And there's so many pockets that I still don't know. How do we create time and space and slow down long enough for us to begin to visit those communities and try the different food and engage with people that don't look like us, in order for us to begin bridging the divide that exists? And I think that's hard because we're comfortable in the communities we grew up in. We're comfortable with people that look like us. We're comfortable with languages that are similar to ours. So how can we kind of shake that up a bit, and really begin to honor the differences and create spaces where people can just sit and listen? The arts are major. They are a major factor. Again, I said it earlier, because it's not about the verbal communication. It is about the artistry and the creativity that exists. And if we can just pause for a moment to really begin to honor that, I really think the arts plays an integral role in what LA has to offer, but also just in acknowledging humanity for what it is.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. True that. Leslie, how about you?
I think that Collette said it all. It's exactly what my response was going to be. I would just add that, I wanted to like conjure the spirit of Jonathan Gold, because I think that he was the ultimate Angelino, and what the spirit that he and the adventure and like the real authentic connections that he made with communities through food, and then all of our work could follow, as an arts community. I think we need more people like Jonathan Gold to make, things not so scary. Like, it's okay to venture into the San Gabriel Valley, and there's like this little mini mall with this restaurant that has the most amazing Vietnamese, whatever. I think if we can just get that kind of spirit going and moving beyond our comfort zone, I think that's absolutely it. But I do think that we're battling urban sprawl, and we're battling, redlining that has divided our communities. So there's a lot to overcome, but I think it's the cultural richness of our area is immeasurable, and we can't, no other place has it like Los Angeles.
Yeah,
I would also say that, we have this opportunity to reflect the city back to ourselves, but also out to the world coming up with the Olympics. And I know, it feels far away, but I think that I really hope that we leverage that opportunity, and that it doesn't feel, like we didn't do enough.
Yeah, it was exciting to watch Amanda Gorman perform at the Super Bowl. Leslie talked about not wanting to play with the ball, but I love the way art and football collided this year. That was pretty cool. We've talked a little bit about what happens when we come back from this thing. I mean, I think that a lot of people are wondering what the arts looks like when we get out of this thing, when we reopen and start to reopen. Can you each talk about what art should do to both escape and go back and be free from this thing and repopulate, but also what are we going to carry with us? What have we learned the pandemic and physical distancing, and what do we take with us from this thing? What's the model going to look like going forward for the arts? And I mean the arts in general, you know, music, dance, art, performance, spoken word, all of it. Leslie, you want to give us a start?
Sure. Well, my hope and dream for the arts out of the pandemic is that we learn that the arts are more about impact and connection and authenticity than it is about butts and seats or eyeballs on paintings. And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. It started with my Stanton fellowship with the Durfee, and really looking at scale and impact, and really pushing funders to think deeply about this also. We need to partner together to think about, do we want deep impact, or do we want, or is it just about, the number of people that we're serving? And I think that the pandemic has really put a spotlight on this very issue, where we can't, yes, just like Betty, we're serving, our reach can be further. We're, seeing global participants, but at the same time, we can't, for a variety of reasons, we're serving less people, but I think we're having a greater impact. So I'm really hoping that that is something that's going to shape our work moving forward.
Yeah. Collette, what about you?
Tim, I don't know I think we missed what you said.
I was just asking you to chime in. I might have frozen. I often look frozen. I often look frozen when I'm not frozen too, so it's tricky.
You went away for a moment. At least your voice went away for a moment. My hope for the arts once this is over. I agree with Leslie, and I also hope that we continue to be the space of expression and growth and acknowledgement, because that's what we're all going to need once this is over. As Leslie said, it's the conversation with funders, in that it is not, the arts are not a nicety, they are a necessity. And that we should all have access to it in a way that works for us. Whether it is, just getting out and valuing nature, or if it is being for dancers, I'll use myself as an example, being in a studio and being able to work through the trauma that we have experienced through movement, through your body. Like, what does that do for your thought process? What does it do for how you are dancers will create those next pieces? This season has had a huge impact on people's emotional lives. And my hope is that those in power and policy makers don't just create policy, but create the policy, back it up with funding that is sustainable, so that the arts can continue to be a space where people can work through and rise above what we have lived in this moment. And it is definitely going to take a collective effort, and just in the education space, for us to not go back to what it was. We have to acknowledge the systems that were broken before COVID, and acknowledge that we have been given an opportunity to do something different, and the arts are part of that difference. So my hope is that performers come back with the information that they have, with that strong entrepreneurial spirit that has been gained during this season, that they don't abandon the opportunities that were created, but they just added to what they were doing before, to make sure that they are building themselves up and creating space for people to come behind them.
That's great. Truly great. Betty?
Yeah, I think I guess this is a a concern more than anything else. I think a lot about the leaders in the arts sector today, and in particular leaders of color who are navigating. The arts sector is always navigating being like this add-on and the first thing that gets cut, and the arts sector in LA has been navigating major regional funders cutting their arts support. So, and that's all pre-COVID, right? And so, now I think a lot about the ecology of leaders in the arts, women leaders, leaders of color, and I really hope that we don't lose as a result of this, as a result of the burnout, as a result of just the lack of funding, those leaders, because their perspectives are, I think, going to be so important, especially, as we're in this context of Black Lives Matter, context of people waking up to, the racist society that we've been functioning in, and these white supremacy underpinnings that we've always existed under. And I hope that both with what Leslie shared around, wanting to make sure that funders are thinking more about deep impact, that includes an investment in the health and wellness of the leaders in the arts.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I want to thank all three of you, Collette, Leslie, Betty. This has been fantastic. I'm honored to be amongst the three of you, and I appreciate you giving your time. I know all of you are very, very, very busy people right now, so I really appreciate you joining us on this, and I wish you the best and continued success in your very important work. So thank you all very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for bringing us together.
Thank you, Tim.
And
hopefully we'll all
Tim.
Get together soon and have a glass of something in person.
Sounds good.
good.
Thank you all. Have a
Thank
good
you very
night.
much. You too. Thank you very much. Bye all.
Bye.
Good night.